Witam Państwa serdecznie, Błażej Hrabkowicz, Toruń, 29. edycja festiwalu EnergaCAMERIMAGE, and with us cinematographer Seamus McGarvey. Hello, Seamus.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Yeah, everything okay?
Oh, loving every second of it. Been here 4 or 5 days now, and just been surrounded by fellow cinematographers, filmmakers, and watching some great movies. It's always lovely to be here. You always leave having been inspired by all the camaraderie and the beautiful films that we see.
Not your first time, I guess.
No, this is actually my third time.
And yesterday we spoke to Alice Brooks, and she said it's her first time here, and I said to her that she probably is one of the few cinematographers left. She was up to this point who has never been to EnergaCAMERIMAGE. You have a very good, I gather, working relationship with Joe Wright.
Yes.
And we spoke to Joe a couple of days ago, and I was asking him about his cinema and his sort of visual style, the fact that he likes, he likes melodrama, and he likes this sort of big scope cinema. So from your point of view as a cinematographer, what is the greatest or the most important thing for you in working with him as a director who has this sort of big scope vision?
Yeah, well, I like discussing with Joe when we embark on a project. We've done 6 films together now, and numerous short films and commercials, but it tends to, the scripts when they come in have a kind of a photographic center. And what's really lovely about Joe, although he has these seams running through his work of melodrama and scope, as you said, there's also an opportunity to sit down and actually find the real sort of photographic heart of a film. And that's something we do on every film. We're able to sit down, lock ourselves in a room, literally, with cups of tea and just work through the script, photographically speaking, cinematographically speaking, sort of scene by scene. And it's almost my favorite part of the filmmaking process with Joe, because we kind of sort of pace around the room, and we think of ideas, and we occasionally look up references on the internet, and just it's a really kind of, before the chaos of a film set, which you know so well, it's a really good way of kind of getting into the movie from a photographic point of view. It's like you find its heart. So it's a kind of a mental storyboarding, or? Yeah, occasionally at that point, Joe does storyboards, but they're quite crude. I don't know. They're little stick insect storyboards, and he sort of notes those things that we discuss as a kind of a sketch pad. Really, they're not elaborate storyboards that you would get on a big Hollywood movie, but nonetheless, I mean, he showed me the little notepad from Atonement, and actually, it's almost like the cut of the film, those little storyboards, because Joe's really amazing, because he does think images like words, and there's no kind of coverage as such in his work. He thinks about the sequence of images, and not only in terms of imagery, but he's always thinking in the sort of collaboration of sound and image. So he thinks about like a metronomic approach to cinema, which is really wonderful, because there's an inbuilt rhythm when we see a scene, as he's directing the actors, he's talking about the meter of the camera and their movement, their choreography, and that really helps us set up the mise en scène, because we can think about the shots that we'd like to do beforehand, but actually it's the actors who obviously bring it to life. And they always have their own notion of where they'd like to be, and of course every space you're in dictates where the camera might be best to place, and that might be completely counter to what you've thought of in advance. You mentioned Atonement, and this is a very interesting film, always has been for me in a visual and a stylistic sense, because you have this first part which is very sensual and very sort of intimate, and then of course you have this, for example, this famous master shot in Dunkirk. And I wanted to ask you, what is the most challenging thing for a cinematographer in terms of these master shots? And
Do you really enjoy them? Because sometimes we view them as this is really, they were really technically good, but maybe I can imagine maybe the cinematographer can go, oh my God, another 5-minute master shot.
Yes, you know me too well. And I argued vehemently against that shot. I'm very glad that Joe won the argument, because I got nominated for that shot for an Academy Award, but because you sort of need a hook in photography for people to notice it. But Joe was adamant. He really wanted to do something that had a hallucinatory quality, because Robbie, the main protagonist, was sort of ebbing in and out of near death, and he just wanted this sort of cavalcade of carousel of madness, of images coming in and out, and to make an objective and a subjective within the same shot. So you move the camera, you look at vistas, and then you come into a face. So that it was playing with those cinematographic devices of objectivity and subjectivity. So, but there was also a practical reason why Joe wanted to do it in one shot, and that was that we were on a beach. The tide would go out and come in, so the beach was only available on a particular day for, I think it was 3 hours. And the light, because we were going to be facing west, was only good in the afternoon. So we had to pick that day when that happened. And it happened to be the last day of the shoot, actually. So it was kind of terrifying to embark on that shot. But you know, I look at somebody shot it's on YouTube of us all kind of running around the beach doing it, and it gives me heart palpitations, because you know you've got one chance at this, and the sun is going down, and that's it. Yeah, but there's a sort of a mad statement of intent in embarking on something like that. Yeah, and it also focuses everyone, because you think everyone's like, really, this is like almost a form of madness. Yeah. But it really kind of creates almost a performance art that's being recorded, and we got it in take 3, and then the sun went on. So. One of my favorite stories with master shots is actually the one they did in the X-Files episode. There is an X-Files episode which was really groundbreaking in television, and they do it in 3 long master shots. And there is a master shot in which Agent Mulder is getting punched in the face, and then the brawl, the fight starts. And they did it in a way that they shot David Duchovny, who's getting punched in the face. Then the camera moved to someone else, and the makeup girl ran to David Duchovny outside the frame and did his makeup, his black eye, and then camera returned, and they did it. That must have been madness. He'll Texas switch.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. I love stuff like that. We actually did a funny thing in Cyrano, where the camera, after a long scene, and we finish in a 2-shot, and the camera comes along and tracks along the colonnade with fencers, and we got Kelvin Harrison, after we panned off and went forward, he ran around the back of the camera, sprinted down to the other end, and then we found him at the other end of the colonnade. So I love little devices that are in camera, like that. People forget in this world of CG that you actually can do things in camera, and it's essentially, it's like Méliès magic of cinema. Yeah.
What do you like the most? What do you what is the most important thing for you in Cyrano? Because you mentioned Cyrano. I know. What was the most challenging thing for you there?
There were many challenges in it. Obviously, the big one of shooting a movie during the pandemic.
Yeah, of course.
And in lockdown in Sicily. But there are advantages to that also, in that we had the town of Noto to ourselves. But it is a challenge. It's a challenge with all the COVID protocols, etc., etc. But there was one big moment at the end of the film. Not to create any spoilers for an audience, but it's on Mount Etna, the volcano by Catania.
The actual Mount Etna.
Yes, we shot the final sequences of the film, battle scenes on Mount Etna, and it was just you can see that I'm probably shaking as a result of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was.
It's fun to work with Joe Wright. That's what I get from you. Well, yeah, it's really
well, it is actually. It's really fun because Joe doesn't do things by half measures. I mean, he really pushes the boat out, and he pushes all of us to try to do our best work, and that sometimes means you're in extreme situations. This was on Mount Etna, 16,000 feet. You know, -15, really unfavorable conditions for equipment, like volcanic ash everywhere and sand. But there's a certain beauty in that because of the uniqueness of it. And again, the fact that you're taking people out of a comfort zone and putting them in an area. It's like theatre in the round, but extreme theatre of cruelty. And in that, again, there's a focus because you can't just drift off to Starbucks and grab a coffee. You know, you're up a mountain in the driving.
That would be something, Starbucks at the Mount Etna. If you just arrive there and then there's Starbucks.
Well, after 10 days of shooting there, we finally got shrugged off the mountain, the volcano, by the volcano herself, who erupted. And we had to scarp her.
It had enough of you.
Yes, it had had enough of us. And frankly, we'd had enough ourselves.
Yeah. One more film I want to ask you about, one of my favorites that you did. We need to talk about Kevin by Lynne Ramsay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a film that, again, such a strong visual style, and the colors, the concept of the color, the use of colors there is really fantastic. So, what was it? What was that experience for you, artistically, creatively?
Oh well, it was an amazingly intense but wonderfully artistic experience working with Lynne Ramsay. I mean, she's one of my best friends and also one of my favorite filmmakers in the world. So for her to ask me to shoot that film was a great honor, and we had great fun prepping it. Again, I was living in New York at the time, and Lynne would come over and we'd workshop the film, and then Tilda and John C. Reilly would join. And it was because of the lower budget nature of it, it was just one of those ones where you think, let's focus on the art of this, and we're not making lots of money or anything. It was really exciting because we'd decided to shoot the film on cellular film, and particularly because at that point digital really hadn't evolved to a degree where red, being a big constituent of the film, wasn't going to register so well, and we wanted almost stained glass window, psychological red, and that was something that in testing we said it's got to be 35mm film. But in part of those workshops, in the first, the last week of our rehearsal period, I would be we'd recording it on a little Canon 5D digital. And we finished everything, and Tilda said, let's go to the pub around the corner. So John C. Reilly and Tilda and Lynne and I went to the pub. And as we were in there having a celebratory drink at the tail end of it, suddenly a deluge of rain broke out outside. It was like literally stair rods. And Tilda had said, let's just go out and shoot some stuff like in the Derek days, because I knew Tilda from Derek Jarman days when we used to run around with Super 8s around the beach at Dungeness. And so we just went out with my Canon 5D and a little 50mm lens and shot, which we thought was going to be a sketch for flashback sequences. But actually, when we saw the footage, it had such abandon and slightly tipsy abandon also. And the rain on the lens and the ebbing focus and just the chaos of it all. It reminded me of the Derek Jarman days. Yeah. We looked at it and we thought, we have to use this. It's fantastic in itself. And we transferred it to film. And it then we shot all the flashbacks that way. So it released suddenly a lot of money in the budget for us. So as well to buy the film. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Seamus, for being here and talking to us.
It's an honor.
Dziękujemy.